Awesome. Hey, you guys. Hey, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. How are y'all doing? I'm super excited to see y'all tonight. Come on in here. Make sure you share it. I'm going to do a little housekeeping over here. Make sure I share it to all our platforms. Angie, say hi to the people.
Hi.
Okay. So, hey, this is Angie. I'm going to introduce her in just a second, but I just want to make sure that I share it to all the different platforms. So make sure you let somebody know that you are tuning in so that we can share this with them. So me and Angie have like a goal tonight, right? We're here to save some lives. So we're going to do that tonight. Let me know if you can hear us when you jump on. Let me know if you can hear us. Instagram, let us know. So we're going to get started. Let me see if I could just share it to the group real quick. Yay. All right. Share it. So my name is Lisa Alexander. I'm the executive director here at Stand Up Survivor. Hey, you guys. Hey, it's a Purple Table Talk, and I'm joined by an amazing guest. Angie, say hey, Angie.
Hi.
Hi, can y'all hear us? Can somebody tell us if y'all can hear us? Say something. If we need to project louder, just tell us. We want to make sure that you do not miss a word. Very clear. Hey, Trish. Thank you. Awesome. So I'm so excited to have Angie here with me. She's a wife. She's a mom. She's a survivor. She's a thriver. She is on her healing journey. Hey, Megan. Let us know where you guys are tuning in from so we can say hey. I'm going to give Angie a second to introduce herself. She is also, her story has been shared on Netflix. I Am a Stalker. And so thank you.
Thank you for having me. This is really important to me to share my story.
I'm glad. Well, I'm glad you chose to share it with us, and I'm excited. All right, you guys. You can hear us. Hey, Debbie. Y'all let us know where you're tuning in from so we can make sure to say hey. I'm so excited we're having this conversation because I think oftentimes people don't recognize how significant domestic violence is. So you don't want to miss this. Make sure that you share with someone, hey, from North Carolina. Make sure that they know that we are talking about domestic violence. And really quickly, February is Teen Dating Violence Month. Angie, when did you meet your abuser?
Oh my goodness. I met him when I was 13, and I have been dealing with him for over 30 years.
13 years old. And been dealing with him for over 30 years. You guys don't want to miss this. Hey, from Texas and Long Island. Hey, you guys. They saw your episode on Netflix. It was very powerful. Thank you for sharing your story so bravely. All right. So we're going to get into this. Don't stop letting us know where you're tuning in from because we want to know. Okay. And just so you guys know, Angie's available for you guys to book her, to connect with her, for her to share her story, to advocate with her. So you guys can get in contact with her, and I'm going to put her information in there, okay? All right, so I asked you initially, why is this moment so important? Why is having this conversation so important for you?
This is a very important part of my life that needs to be shared. I did meet him when I was 13 years old. I have been dealing with this for over 30 years. There are so many times that the system broke, that the legal system didn't work, that I wasn't protected. And then eventually through the span of time, other people weren't protected because there wasn't enough protection put in place.
And I'm glad you said that because I don't know if you guys have seen the Netflix series, I'm a Stalker, and her episode is on there. We're going to talk a little bit about how many mistakes, how many deadly mistakes were made along the way, right? Okay, so let's talk about it. When did you meet your abuser?
So I met my abuser when I was about 13 years old. And at that time, my stepdad would not allow us to date each other. And my stepfather said, hey, come back in a year. Give her a year, come back in a year. And in a year, he came back. And that should have been like a red flag right there. But, I was young and I was like, oh, he's going to give me some attention. And that should have been like really a sign at that point. But, at 13 years old, I don't see that as a sign. I see that as love. Yeah. I'm getting all this attention and he's there all the time and he's calling me all the time. And his possessiveness to me really wasn't that. I didn't see it as that. And so I think being a young person, a lot of young people don't see it that way.
When you talk about possessiveness, like what would you say are some of the signs of that possessiveness you saw?
Oh, goodness. So he would call me like all hours of the night. And if I didn't answer the phone, he would start calling my parents' phone in the middle of the night. Wow. And, what do you do to stop the calls from your parents' phone. You start answering your phone.
Right.
Or, he would come knocking on my bedroom window at night. Or there were times that if I didn't do what he wanted me to do, he would actually sneak in the doggy door of my parents' house, and I would wake up with him standing over me.
Wow. That's not the first time that I've heard of an abuser sneaking through a doggy door. Parents, are y'all listening? They're sneaking through doggy doors to get to your child. And so when he's not getting a hold of you, but he's calling your parents, did your parents notice that as a red flag at all?
They would put limitations on it, but it would just get worse.
Wow.
So, I would call it stalking now, but he would show up at the high school after school, or he would have his, my friends, call me, and then like three-way calling existed, back then. And so, there'd be a three-way call and he'd be on the call. They would call and say, "Hey, is Angie there?" And then he would be on the line as well.
Okay.
So that he had workarounds. And then, like I said, he would always, show up after school or before school or in the middle of the night. And, I didn't feel at the time that I could go to my parents and go, "Hey, he's sneaking in the doggy door."
Why didn't you think you could tell your parents he was sneaking through the doggy door?
I think fear. Fear had a lot to do with it.
Were you afraid of him or afraid of what your parents would say?
Both. I was afraid of both, because it seemed like the harder my parents put rules down, the more controlling and possessive that he became.
Wow. That's good. I really hope parents that are listening hear that, because that's important. And so you guys still stay together. So how did that progress?
So I started seeing him, and they started putting rules and limitations down, and it would get worse. And then, he would be more controlling. And so the way that it actually ended up stopping at that period was that he had left for basic training for the military.
Okay.
And he was gone and had done something that the commander didn't like. And somehow the FBI got involved. And when the FBI got involved, they came, they spoke to my parents, they spoke to me. And at that point, that's when all ties were cut.
Okay. So your parents cut ties with him, everybody cut ties.
But the FBI had to really.
Wow. But Angie, you ended up marrying him.
I did. Okay.
Wow. Okay. So I'm seeing all these things. This is unfolding for me too, guys. Okay. Could you scroll down for the comments for me real quick? Okay. So the FBI came at such a young, and they interviewed your parents, separated you guys. Yes. So how did you guys get back together?
So again, being a young person, I thought that was love.
Because they're trying to keep you guys apart.
Yeah, they were trying to keep us apart, and man, I loved him, and he gave me so much attention, and he was always there, and I thought he was taking care of me, and so about my junior year of high school, I started driving, and I still felt this deep-seated love for him, and so I drove at night one night because he lived in a different state but close proximity to us. I go over there this one night, and I talk to his brother, and I find out where he's working, and I go and I talk to him. And, at that time he was like, I'm seeing someone and she's pregnant, and, that's just not feasible, So I go home and I go on with my life. And about a year after I graduated high school, he had gotten a hold of one of my friends and gotten back in contact with me.
And how long after you guys reconnected did you get married?
Probably about a year. Okay. I don't even know if it was that long, because I'm pregnant, and he wanted to provide health insurance and housing and was trying to find a way to do that. And he had been talking to a recruiter who had said, "Hey, if you rejoin the military, if we can get whatever exonerated or whatever done, then, I can provide medical coverage for her, but you got to be married."
Okay. So that kind of brought you guys together. Yes. You decided to get married. Okay. So did you notice when you were dating during that year before you got married, were there any red flags or anything that you saw during that time?
I didn't really see anything at that time.
Okay. So everything was good. So when did things start to change? You had this baby, you guys get married.
So I actually had a child in between, which was not his. And we get married, and I would say almost immediately after we got married that the violence started. Wow. And it started small. Yeah. Where if I did something he didn't like, I would get shoved off the bed and have to sleep on the floor. Or he would get angry and child lock the doors on the car and drive the car and tell me, he was going to kill me or things like that.
So those are pretty significant. Those are pretty significant right in the beginning. And it's interesting because so often I hear it started right after we got married. So this is not like uncommon at all, but it is so scary. And he would push you off the bed and you'd have to sleep on the floor. Child lock. I'm going to tell you, I've heard that one before. Child lock all the doors, the driving crazy, all that. Yeah.
And I was like small enough at that time. I weighed, I'm 5 foot tall, weighed 100 pounds. And you think, you can kick the window out of the door. You can't kick those windows out. Like there's no, and so he was in total control at that moment, doing whatever. And you're in the back seat, you're scared for your life. And he's got ultimate control.
Wow. And how long did that go on for?
The abuse.
Mm-hmm.
We were married about 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did it get increasingly worse or what?
It got very, very, very bad. And I would go and get a restraining order and then he would break in. So it was almost easier for me to know that he was in the house than to go and get a restraining order that he gets kicked out of the house and then breaks in. At one point I had a restraining order and I was pregnant at the time and my little boy was in like his bedroom in his bed. And I had heard a noise in the back of the apartment. And the only thing I had was a rolling pin. I go and I pick up this rolling pin and I go to the back of the apartment and here he comes out. When he came out, he ripped the rolling pin out of my hand. I ran to go get my son out of the crib. And as soon as I came back to the doorways when he strangled me. And I remember everything going black, going to my knees, my little boy hitting the ground. And when I came to, he's pulling me by my hair into the kitchen. And that's when he sat with a knife to my throat.
How long into the marriage was that?
Not very long.
Wow.
Maybe less than a year, probably.
Wow. And it's so interesting that you talk about, because we talked a little bit about this before. You had a restraining order in place.
I had several restraining orders in place.
Several restraining orders.
Because I would go and get a restraining order and then something like that would happen and then I would back down. Or another time I went and got a restraining order and the judge had ordered someone to come pick up his personal belongings. And so I went and I opened the sliding glass door. And when I did so, his friend was staying there. His friend moved to the side. He came into the door. His friend left. He beats the crap out of me, and gets done and takes off. And, the cops can't find him. And so, nothing was done.
That's terrible. And, I want to use the phrase flying monkeys. We talk about those people who kind of aid and abet the abuser. Like that's exactly what that person was who stood in front of him. Yeah. As though, so of course you're open to this person, the police send them, they're going to come get their things and behind him and then he physically assaults you as a result. And someone just said, in the comments that they're so sorry that you went through that. They can resonate with you. Someone else shared that the worst part of the abuse happened after they got married too. And so when you talk about, when we talk about as advocates, like the lethality assessments and looking at how dangerous situations are, we talk about strangulation, we talk about weapons, and we're talking about this within the first year of your marriage.
And as time went on, the cops show up and, you may have marks, they have marks. And, it's like both of you are going to go to jail, and then you kind of separate. But he got smarter as time went on. So instead of, leaving visible marks, he might beat me in the back of the head or he would suffocate me with pillows. And so he got smarter as time went on with all of that.
How were you doing during all of this? What were you thinking? You're a mom, you're a wife, you're trying to survive.
So I was raised Catholic. Even though I wasn't a practicing Catholic, I still was raised that way. And even though I wasn't married in the Catholic Church, I still believed that you get married in sickness and in health. And I honestly believed that he was mentally ill. And I was trying to hold my family together. And, DFS got involved and they took my children for a period of time. And they had told me, if you can't protect yourself, you can't protect your children. And so, I tried to put my family back together. And, you struggle with, he's mentally ill. And it's a very hard point to get to say, it's beyond mental illness.
So I want to touch on that really quickly, because oftentimes we'll talk to survivors and they'll say, well, they have a diagnosis or they're mentally ill or this happened to them. And so I'm going to stay and kind of work it out and figure it out. But you realize at some point, this is not.
It's not getting any better.
Yeah.
It wasn't getting any better. And I needed to put my children first.
Yeah, that's a tough one, especially with Department of Children. They get involved, and then.
But as soon as I left, they kept saying, "It's not you, it's him. You can't protect yourself. It's not you." And as soon as you leave him, you can have your kids back.
Okay.
And as soon as I left, I had my kids back.
Wow, that's good. I'm really glad to hear that. I'm really glad it happened that way. And it's a really tough space because you love your children and you want to get out of this abusive situation. So it's tough.
It is.
It's a tough space. So that's a year in. So this progressively got worse. How did you get to the point where enough was enough? Like, what happened? What was that breaking point?
So the breaking point was when we had our last son together. He was born in August. In December, Dan had shoved the bassinet. The baby was in the bassinet. And he got mad and he shoved the bassinet. And I remember that I picked up my kids. It was snowing out. I picked up my kids. I had no shoes. I had nothing. I picked them up and I ran in the snow to the house next door. And I pounded on the door and a man answered the door and I said, I need help. I need help. And he said, I'm not helping you. And so I ran, I don't know how far in the snow until I went to a gas station. And thankfully, the attendant at the gas station had called the local shelter and they sent a taxi and got me.
Wow. Okay, so the neighbor, what in the world?
I think sometimes people don't want to get involved.
And it's understandable because in these situations become so violent sometimes. And if it's your neighbor, you might have heard anything. Do you think they ever heard or seen any of the?
Far enough away. So none of my abuse that I can remember ever happened outside. It was always inside. And we lived in a house, so it wasn't close enough that they could probably hear a lot.
Yeah.
And I know that he had hung out over there a few times drinking beer and then whatever. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Wow. Sandra said, I'm so glad you were able to get your kids back. Yeah. I mean, as survivors, that's our heartbeat. That's our life, and that's why we keep going. So I'm really glad that happened too. Okay. So the neighbor didn't help you, but the shelter did. And the gas station did. Like, these people are so important and intricate to the parts of our journey in our life.
Absolutely.
So you talk about, you went to the shelter, and what happened after that?
So at that time, it was a long time ago, I went to the shelter and I left with nothing. No shoes, no diapers, no formula, no money, no debit card, no car, absolutely nothing. And I get to the shelter and upon intake, for whatever reason, they had said, this is going to be your dollar amount that's going to be due. And I thought, I can't pay that.
That's odd.
I have absolutely nothing. I have nothing.
Wow. And
I stayed there one night and ended up calling my grandmother, and we went and stayed with my grandmother for a period of time.
So after you escaped, right? And okay, let's talk about the shelter. That's odd. I don't even understand that. It's devastating to say the least. But so when you decided, okay, you escaped, you're at grandma's. Did you guys end up divorcing? What happened after that?
So he was calling, I worked at a company and as like a receptionist, and he would call and make death threats. And
he was threatening you?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. What was he threatening?
That he was going to kill me.
Okay. Did he include the kids in that, or was that just you?
Just towards me.
So he was telling you he's going to kill you? Okay.
Yeah. And he would hide, under a desk one day at work. He was under a desk.
At your job?
At my job. And I guess my thing was, he was a stalker, that's part of it. But being a stalker, you have to understand that these people will wait however long until they find you. So if you have family and they know where your family lives and it's someone that you see on a semi-regular basis, they might be sitting out there. If you have a favorite restaurant you go to every so often, they might be sitting out there. I mean, if they know a pattern that you have, it's very easy to find you. So
I want to talk about that for a second. So let's talk about the stalker aspect. I think you made some really good points, and I think people really need to hear, because I often talk to survivors and they say, well, I'm escaping, but I have to go to work on Monday. Or we usually go here of girls' night Friday. And I'm thinking, you cannot follow the same routines and think that your abuser doesn't know what that looks like. So they know where you are. They know your family members. It's really important. They are stalkers. And I think the key of what you just said was they'll wait. They are in it for the long haul.
And that is actually how he ended up breaking into my house eventually.
Waited.
He waited.
Wow. All right. So once you realized that he was threatening you, he was saying, I'm going to kill you. What did you do?
So I continued to live at my grandmother's house and eventually got a different house to live in. And at that time, I had been talking to someone, and they were very scared that he would actually do something to me.
Were you scared that he was going to do something to you?
So at that time, he had moved down to like southern Missouri. So I didn't really feel that the threat was that real at that time.
Okay.
I thought there's some distance here. It wasn't a huge concern to me. And so I ended up moving. I started talking to someone who was very scared, especially with all the death threats. And so Dan ends up riding a bus from southern Missouri, about a 3 or 4 hour bus ride up here. He had broken into the garage window. And the thing that he would do is he wouldn't break the glass. He would actually take the seal out from around the glass, put the glass back in. And so if you weren't...
You wouldn't even know.
You wouldn't know. And so...
oh my goodness.
Yeah, he hid in the basement for hours. I had gone downstairs at one point to like throw laundry in. We found out later on that he had actually unplugged the washer and dryer so we could hear what was going on upstairs. And eventually he made his way up the stairs, and there was linoleum in the kitchen, and you could hear him walking on the linoleum. And that's at the point that we realized he was in the house.
Wow.
So I had picked up the phone to call 911. And at that time, it was like the cordless phones that were kind of loud when you dialed.
Oh, yeah.
So I dialed 911, and he took out across, from the front door. Cops show up, can't find him. They can't find him. He comes back and busts out a window.
Comes back when?
That night.
Oh my goodness.
Why the cops are still there? You've
got to be kidding me.
Nope. He comes back, busts out the window.
Oh my goodness.
So the cops take off after him, chase him down. When they find him, they find a knife. Okay. The cops come back. They said, hey, I need you to go through your kitchen and see if there's anything missing in your kitchen. I'm like, oh, my dishes. So he's like, put up your dishes that are in the dishwasher. See what's missing. And so I began to put stuff up, and I start to put the butcher knives up. And I realized, because I had a butcher block knife set, that one of the large butcher knives was missing. And so, they come and they investigate, and they find out, he had come in through the window, and then they find a bag, and in this bag is gloves. Anyway, they prosecute him, but he gets prosecuted for burglary. Burglary.
Did y'all see that? Because that wasn't on the show. Okay, so let me just go back. And I think it's so important to know. I'm no expert in stalking, so I really love that you're talking about this. He took off the seal, y'all. Look, somebody yelled burglary. Yes, burglar. He took off the seal. So you would, of course, if you come home, you see a broken window, you're like, oh my goodness. Took off the seal, put it back so you wouldn't even have known. Stayed down there for hours. Unplugged things. Came upstairs. Stole a butcher knife. Took a butcher knife. We don't give him that much credit. And then runs a police. You call 911, the police can't find him.
Then they have to come back and break the window.
He breaks the window, and then the police chase him. Yes, somebody yelled burglary. Yes. She said, I remember that from the park. He got charged with burglary, but they found a bag with gloves in it.
That's correct.
He had a butcher knife. What do we think his plan was? And this is just, we talked about it too, dropping the entire ball. He has a history of domestic violence. There are restraining orders.
History of domestic violence. He had strangled me by that time. There was police records. And in fact, I have them over there. I have a stack of police records about this thick of reports. And yes, he gets charged with burglary. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm glad it got y'all as mad as it did. Somebody said WTF. I'm with you on that one. All right. The criminal justice system is a joke for DV victims, but that's another conversation for another day. Listen, Leanne, we could have the conversation. It's true. We're going to talk about that in a little bit too. Okay. So he gets charged with burglary, which is insane,
it gets better.
Yeah. Talk to us.
Okay. So he ends up serving, I believe, I don't know what he got sentenced for, but he served 7 years. And
For burglary.
His sentence got reduced. It gets good. So he turned state's evidence on a case that the prosecutor needed some information on, and they lessened his sentence, and so he got out in 7.
Wow. Served 7 years. Somebody said the law needs to do better. God forbid if you'd have taken matters into your own hands, things would have turned out much differently. Yeah, we talked about. Okay, so he did 7 years in. Okay, he comes out. And if I remember correctly, I'm going to jump ahead, but I don't know if you guys saw it. He said 7 years was nothing.
Yeah, he did.
He said on the
and
Netflix,
he also
he said
he had committed 13 felonies and had only been charged with 5. He knows the system well enough to manipulate the system to be able to get out
and brag about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Did you guys? Let us know if you saw the Netflix series. Hey, Victoria, and if you haven't, you guys have to catch it after this, of course. After this. Okay, so he served 7 years, and that's 7 years. Were you still married, or had you gotten divorced at this time?
We had gotten divorced at that time.
And were you feeling safe? He's in jail. How are you feeling?
So by that time, I had moved to a different city.
Okay.
I had gotten remarried, and my husband at that time had adopted the children.
Okay.
So they had different last names. We felt safe because we were constantly monitoring where he was at. We were looking at the Missouri CaseNet system to see, if there's new cases or where. So we kind of had an idea of where he was located. And we kind of continued to watch that. And at a certain period of time, 2008, I noticed a case on CaseNet and actually called the prosecutor at the time. And what had happened was he had broken into a woman's house, was standing over her with a knife. She was able to take the knife and actually stab him with the knife. Unfortunately, at that time, I was told there really wasn't anything I could do, and that they couldn't locate the woman. And he ended up getting off with probation on that one.
He has a thing with knives.
He does have a thing with knives.
So he goes in, standing over the woman. She stabs him back, self-defense, I'm assuming, and then he gets probation. This ball doesn't exist. Someone said, I haven't seen a Netflix special. I'm definitely going to watch it. You definitely should. I saw your episode. I'm so happy you got out. We are definitely happy. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay. He stabs this woman. You see that online. What happens next?
So I contact the prosecutor. They said, hey, we can't do anything. Can't find her. So I'm going to cooperate, whatever it was. Gets probation. I continue to watch CaseNet. Then about 2010, I'm looking at CaseNet and see that he was charged with murder. And so I contact the prosecutor again because I felt like I needed to make a difference. Even though he had caused pain and torment and, beat the crap out of me, that I needed to protect other people as much as I could. And so I reached out to the prosecutor. I told him who I was. They put me in the gentleman who was murdered. His name is James. They put me in contact with James's mother, Bonnie. And I went to the sentencing hearing, and it was really good because he was up front. They brought us in the back, so he didn't know that we were going to be there. And so, I was able to go up and talk to the judge and tell my story. And I remember him just staring at me. He's got very black, dark eyes. He does. And I remember him staring at me. And, I tell my story and I go and I sit back down. And he gets to address the judge. And I remember at one point he says, he's talking about our boys. And he says, I never thought of us as divorced. And at that time, you know how you get like when you just lost it. I'm crying and laughing at the same time. And, Bonnie's holding my hand and I'm just like, who says something like that? And I remember the bailiff saying, it's okay, sweetie. It's okay. We know he's crazy or whatever. But yeah.
Wow. And I thought you have 3 kids together.
We have 3 kids together.
Three kids together. Okay. So he didn't consider divorce. And I don't know if you saw it, but he definitely says what he really feels.
Oh,
and
yes.
He definitely does have the whole dark eyes. Okay, that's a great question, Latoya. I'm going to definitely ask that question in a few minutes. They say your story feels so relatable. I'm so happy that you got it and you're safe. So you're thinking murder, because I remember you said when the lady got stabbed, you reached out then to the prosecutor. So you've been trying to put your voice into this. Say, I know this person. I've known him since I was 13? Yeah, I can tell you about him. And it's so interesting too, because I feel like sometimes they overlook the survivor when we know the abuser more than anyone else, but they're not hearing the voice of the survivor, right? And so they're thinking justice. Yeah, the justice is what the survivor has to say. They've lived it. So Bonnie, I just want to say, I don't know if Bonnie's watching, but we are so sorry for the loss of your son. I know there are no words, and I know that you're in this fight to keep him behind bars. And so we join you in that fight. Because if you watch the Netflix film, he doesn't think 7 years was anything. And so now he's been put away for murder. And that was a whole story. You have to watch that part, because I don't know if you want to share any of that,
I can share go for it. She's going to share and so, when I went to actually talk at the sentencing, I knew nothing about the actual crime.
Okay.
I went to share my story. And, it was important when I did get contacted by Netflix that I wanted Bonnie to be involved, because where my story stops is where hers begins. And it's so important that the whole thing gets put out there. James went for a weekend away. He went to get away for a little bit of time.
And James is Bonnie's son.
James is Bonnie's
son.
Got it. That was murdered. I'll give a little bit of the facts, because it's not my story to tell, but I know that he was in southern Missouri, had met a woman there, did not know her before that. Dan had some kind of a relationship at some point with this woman. Dan finds James and this woman together. There's some kind of confrontation, breaks it apart. I believe Dan came back again, another confrontation. The cops get involved. They're supposed to hold Dan for 72 hours. They did not hold Dan for 72 hours, and he was released. And at that point, James and the woman decided to go away from where they had been. So Dan gets released. He finds out where they are. He starts to walk to this location. An off-duty officer who had no idea, honestly, probably, what was going on, picked him up and took him to this location. He ends up waiting until night, slashes some tires, ends up walking in and killing James.
That's just so devastating. I think there's just really as I'm listening to the story unfold, I just become angrier inside, listening to all of these things.
And I think I worded it this way on Netflix. There were so many times that he should have been stopped, that he wasn't stopped. That even if at the time I wasn't strong enough as a victim, there was enough evidence that he shouldn't have been charged with burglary. Mm-hmm. He shouldn't have got probation. If you look at the history, or you look at my police reports, I have a huge stack of police reports over and over and over. This man should not have been able to do what he's done.
That's it. I think that's it. He should never have even gotten that far. He should have been locked up a long time ago.
Well, and the very scary thing is that in Missouri, life is not life. And so he is actually
eligible. Life is what? If life is not life, life is...
I think he can serve, I think he's eligible after 23 or 25 years. So he is eligible for parole in 2034.
Entirely too soon. And the fact, what is life if it's not life? That doesn't even make any sense to me, but okay, Missouri. Mm-hmm. So he's eligible for parole.
Absolutely.
And this is not a first-time offender we're talking about. We're talking about someone who has a history of violent crimes, of knives, and now murder, domestic violence, and is eligible for parole.
Absolutely.
And what are you guys doing? I know this is a fight that you guys are.
So the first step was kind of Netflix. We had talked off and on, but we really didn't know how to get involved, to get the word out there, to tell people that laws need to change, and that, this is our story. And, out of the blue, I was contacted by Transistor Films, who sold the story to Netflix. And that was kind of our big starting point. We didn't make any money on the Netflix show, the whole purpose to do it was that we want people to know this is what's going on. And that, I personally am very fearful if he were to be released. Because as he says in the Netflix series, I'm his nemesis. This has been 30 years of my life that I've been dealing with him. And, if he gets out, what that means for me is very scary.
Yeah. And it shouldn't even be a possibility. That should never even be something that hangs over you. The fact that he could possibly get out.
Absolutely.
Life is life. Murder.
Plain, cold-blooded murder. Planned. I mean, he went there with a purpose. Yeah. And if you think back to when he broke into my house,
he went there with a purpose too.
And even there, he says in the Netflix thing, I went there, pretty much to kill that night.
Yeah.
And then, years later, this is the same scenario. He breaks in at night, has a knife. It's the same thing.
And I don't know why they would think that he wouldn't going to do the same thing if you let him out. Like, to me, that doesn't even make sense. Why would you even put that on the table as an option? Whew. All right. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I know there was a couple ones. There was one about how are your children handling all of this?
So my children are older. They're in their late 20s.
Okay.
I think it was important when we raised them, and when I say we, it's me and their adoptive dad. I always taught them, yes, he's your biological father, but he chose to be your dad. And when I talked to them about even doing the Netflix series, they knew it was going to be difficult, because even though they have nothing to do with them, it's their biological father. Yeah. And I think, at some point I had one of them kind of thinking, could this possibly be me? Could I ever be able to go down that road? Is it mental illness? Could that mental illness affect me? But my children have been very supportive during the whole process.
And I'm not surprised that question was asked. I think that's a really valid question, especially for kids of all kinds of crimes and things that they see. Like, is that me? Is it running the genes? Could that be me? Let me see. I'm sending so much love and healing for you. Okay. The fact that he was not stopped sooner is just crazy. I know you talked a little bit about, you had several restraining orders.
Oh, yes.
And so we talked a little bit earlier, because sometimes we have chat before, and I think you said something really important. And I think I want to chat about it a little bit. You talked about a restraining order or order of protection, right? And it being a piece of paper. And then her husband, who is here, y'all, who's wonderful, made a statement. He said, I'm going to quote him, by the way. He said, it works if you get caught. And so we talked about how, because, people kind of struggle between should I get it? It's just a piece of paper. But if they get caught, it becomes what it's supposed to be created for, right? And so we talked about that, and your thought on restraining orders, because you had several and then you stopped getting them. So talk a little bit about that for maybe someone who's considering getting them. Or
I think, so the purpose of them, if they worked, that would be wonderful. Yeah. However, they don't work the way that they're supposed to work. Because if you've got someone breaking into your house, you've got someone stalking you, you can't go, I have a restraining order. They're coming at you.
Right.
And, it is only if they get caught. And there were times that, I'd have a restraining order and I wouldn't go to get my final, permanent restraining order, because he was either stopping me or, I'm like, it's a piece of paper. What good is it going to do me to go get another one? Yeah. There's a certain point you're just like, there's no point to it.
And I think specifically because you were dealing with a stalker, someone who didn't care about this piece of paper.
Oh, absolutely.
For some people, it may make a difference, but for someone of his caliber who just doesn't care, who hasn't cared, that's not gonna.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And another thing we talked about too is being inside the home versus outside of the home. So the restraining order kept him outside of the home. And I know sometimes survivors will say, well, if I leave, then what? What am I going to do? Like, I know what it's like to live with the abuse in the home. I don't know what if he goes out there, he might try to come in, or they might try to come attack me. What were your thoughts on that?
It was easier for him to be in my home because I knew where he was at. It wasn't the surprise attack where he's taking the window out and hiding and coming at me. I knew he was in the kitchen. I knew he was in the bedroom. I knew where he was at. And the beatings and the attacks were worse when he had been forced outside of the home and came into the home. And he got smarter over time. He did strangle me, but over time he learned, if I suffocate her with a pillow, there's no marks, or he would hit me in the back of the head because those aren't visible bruises.
Yeah. And someone said a little bit earlier, it's so eerie how similar your story is to their story, which of course, is heartbreaking. We don't want anybody to go through that. But I really just want to sit on that for a second, because I think it's important for people to recognize. We say, well, why don't they just leave? Right. But if they leave, and when he left and he still came back and the abuse was worse, and so that's one of the main reasons I really want you guys to hear that. When we say, well, you should just leave. Well, they know what they're dealing with in the home. It's what happens when they're forced out of the home that you don't know.
And there are also so many other reasons that people choose to stay. Their children. In my head, like, it was mental illness. I leave. I don't have a car. I don't have a bank account. I don't have anything, and it makes it difficult to leave sometimes. Even though you know what you're encountering, it makes it hard.
You're really difficult. I'm glad you had grandma's house to go to, though. That's a real blessing when you think it was awesome. So I know you talked about being angry. You are ticked off. Tell me, why are you angry? What are you pissed off about?
I'm glad you said pissed. I am pissed off. I am pissed off that the system did not work. Even though I was not strong enough at that time period, the prosecutor could have done more. The fact that he gets probation, he's got this long-standing history of knives and strangulation and all of this, and the woman was so scared that she wouldn't come forward. Probation, and I am so angry that the system has not worked the way that it should work. I'm angry that, you can cold-blooded kill someone and still be eligible for parole. I just don't understand why our system is like that. And the fact, that he is eligible for parole, but he has this history. What is he going to do when he gets out? I mean, he said 7 years was nothing.
I literally feel like he said the same thing about 23. And he sat there with such cold, callous intention.
Well, and my thing is, okay, so you figure 23 years, he comes out, no job, no family. He's got nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose.
And jail time is nothing for him.
Absolutely.
So I'm glad you're pissed off. Yeah. I think being pissed off really pushes us to do something as survivors. Someone said the most dangerous time for victims, of course, is when they leave. You don't wait until that. Why does our system allow them to get out? It's crazy. It's a great question. Why? And it's like, we're telling you that they're dangerous, yet and still they don't take it seriously. And, I always say our system is very reactive, not proactive. We'll wait till something happens. They will say, oh my goodness, that's horrible. We should do something. But we're telling you that this is the pattern in history. Okay, so what else would you like to share with someone who's watching today? If you guys have any questions, please make sure you drop them in the chat.
So, I had closed the door to all of this. And it wasn't until I was contacted to do the Netflix series that it brought up a lot of the issues that I'm having. So I have PTSD, and it's triggers and hypervigilance. And it's brought up things that I never thought that I would have to deal with again. And, I'm great that I have a wonderful therapist that I go to. I didn't really believe in EMDR therapy.
Okay.
But it's really helped me.
Did y'all hear that? Tell the people. Let them know. EMDR helps her.
Yes,
Okay, good.
Yeah, EMDR has been wonderful.
Awesome.
Talking about it has been wonderful. So
yeah. And I know that you're remarried.
Oh yes.
He's over here, y'all.
He is over there.
He is. And so tell us, how did you even decide? Because y'all know February is Love Month. We're doing love after abuse. And so you've experienced this. Well, how did you get to that place where you could do that again?
I think it's been hard. And I'll be honest, I've been married 3 times. I think that it's difficult to get over a relationship, and it will affect your other relationships until you learn to break that.
That was good. I will put it on actually to repeat it, but I won't do that to you because that was really good. Yeah. So how did you find the place where you can actually say, and you talked about how this is just the best relationship. Like, how did you get to that place of being even able to trust again? Like,
because he supports me. And it's the little things, with my PTSD, he's there beside me. Like if I freak out in the middle of a grocery store, he's there beside me. been in the middle of a conference for work and he's walking me because the groups are so large that sometimes I get triggers. He walks me to my conference room or, making sure that I'm okay. He's very protective of me when it comes to my triggers. And so, and there's days I'm like, I can't get out of bed. And he's like, baby, you don't have to get out of bed.
He sounds like that. Baby, you don't have to get out of bed.
He's got Texas accent.
Baby, you don't have to get out of bed.
But I mean, he understands that there are days that I just can't process and allows me to heal. And he's helping me heal. And I think that's a big part of it too, is that he's helping me heal.
Yeah. Good love will help you heal. Good love will help you heal. So what would you say to someone who's like, I can't even believe that you were able to fall in love again and be happy. And like, I could never do that.
It takes time. It takes time. And you don't go looking for it. It comes to you.
That's good. Would you say, oh yeah, after 5 years, then it's
no.
Okay, good.
I wouldn't give it a time period. You'll know when you know.
So is it challenging? Would you say that it's challenging because you got remarried?
I guess that's the thing. It is very challenging because I tried. I was raised, family, marriage, kids. This is the way it's supposed to be. And I tried, I tried like heck to say, I want a family. This is how it's going to be. Didn't work. I want a family. This is how it's going to be. Didn't work. And it has to come to you. You have to heal. It will help you heal when the time is right.
Yeah. And so you were able to date from, somebody said, yes, love will find you. You were able to date from a healed place. And did you find when you were choosing to date, were you looking for something specific or like definitely not looking for something specific?
I had, at that time, 5 kids. And I'm like, okay, I'm working 2 jobs, 5 kids. I need stability. I want a family. And, it's kind of funny because when you think of marriage, you're like, okay, what boxes do they check? Because sometimes, you know what I'm saying? It's stability and this and this and this. And you have to throw that out the window. You have to throw that out the window and go with your heart.
Yeah. So she's like, I have 5 kids. I need stability. I don't need anybody. I don't need a 6th kid. I need a partner.
I had a 6th kid eventually. But
Okay. Well, she definitely needs her partner to be her 6th kid. But I love that. I think, and I've had the opportunity to meet this wonderful man. And it's so interesting too, experiencing love after abuse. All it's different. It's a settling feeling. It's something that just sits with you. It's not an anxious. It doesn't cause you to have this anxiousness.
There's no work to it. It just comes and it's peaceful and it's just there.
It's easy.
Yeah, very easy.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that it's going to give somebody some hope. Okay. Somebody had a question. They say Bonnie said you're doing great. Hey, Bonnie. Hey.
Bonnie. I love you.
Someone said, does the PTSD cause you not to be able to get out of bed? I never used to be like that, but there are some days I can't do anything.
So I have PTSD, hypervigilance, depression, anxiety. And again, it's come a lot since the Netflix series. But yeah, there are days where you're just exhausted, that you feel like you can't function. And it's very difficult to get out of bed sometimes. Yeah. Absolutely.
And how do you work through that? How do you push past that? Are there some tools or
some days it's okay to stay in bed. If you need to recoup for a day and take a day off, now it becomes an issue if it becomes, all the time or, you're taking a week or whatever. But every once in a while you have to give yourself that little break.
Give yourself that break. Give yourself that grace. You deserve it. Victoria said, hey, Victoria. How did Netflix find you and how were you able to move on mentally?
Okay. So things have kind of just dropped in my lap, which has been so weird. About a year ago or so, I get a message on my Facebook and they had said, hey, we're Transistor Films out of the UK. We would really like to talk to you about your story. And I was laying in bed and I'm like, what is this? Like, what is this? And so I start looking at Transistor Films. I'm like, is this real? And so I realized they're a real company out of the UK. And, I think I had started talking to Bonnie and I'm like, hey, Bonnie, this is going on. And I think we set up a call. I set up a call with them after I realized they were real. And I said, how did you find me? Like out of all the people, and you're out of the UK, why are you picking me? Like, what? This is so weird, And they were actually doing research on stalkers and had found court cases that involved him.
Wow.
And that is how it got started.
Wow. So interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And how were you able to move on mentally?
It's been difficult. I think there for a while I was fine. The Netflix thing, again, has brought up so much trauma. And, I do see a counselor once a week. I'm not ashamed to say that because I believe, it's for my health.
Yeah, that's the best thing ever.
It's for my well-being, and I do the EMDR therapy. But mentally, it may be something that I have to deal with for the rest of my life.
Yeah. And I love that you go to therapy. Therapists, hello. We're all like, yes, therapy is wonderful. Therapists have therapists, doctors have doctors. Go. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's so important.
Absolutely.
And honestly, it's just such a great part of the healing process. You're amazing and so inspirational. Okay. That's what someone said. So what have you learned about yourself throughout this entire process?
I've learned that I am way stronger than I ever gave myself credit for.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Anybody have any other questions? Anything that you would like to share? Did you have anything you wanted to say? You wanted to share? Okay. We'll give you the floor. I know, put him on the spot. He's like, do not ask me. Okay. Anything else? I know that you guys listen. Hi, Norma. That's Norma Peterson, Stacy Peterson's sister-in-law. And so we did something with her before, and she's still missing. Drew Peterson is... Anyway, so she's with Document the Abuse and talks about documenting all, if you're going through it, how important documentation is. Document what's happening to you. She does have a social media account. Please let them know what it is. And I'm also going to add it to the top of the video at the end. What is your social media?
So it is, I only have Facebook, and it is Angelyn Thompson, Domestic Violence Survivor, I believe is what it is.
Can you say it one more time for us?
Angelyn Thompson, Domestic Violence Survivor.
All right, so that's ANGELYN.
And then THOMPSON.
Yes. And now I'll also add it. And if you scroll down a little bit, I feel like I shared something earlier about that. Someone said you're amazing. Hi, Demi.
And I want to, I know Bonnie's on here, and I want to point this out. This is actually a pin that she had made in her son's memory.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So yeah, I have the pin on,
She
Bonnie.
has the pin on. Are they somewhere? Does she sell them?
She does have them. I don't know if she'll put...
Yeah.
She also has a page. Bonnie,
Bonnie, add your page. Bonnie is the mother
of
James, who was the one who was murdered. If you've watched it, I see it, and she said yes. Please add it to the chat. Leanne wants you on her podcast. How can you book her? If you go to her page and then contact her there. She's
absolutely.
Listen, we're rallying around you, so let's do this.
It is so important that I get this out there, and it's not only important to show that the system is broke, but it's also important that people realize that these people are eligible for parole.
It's crazy. And I feel like I asked her, like, what are some really important things? And that's one of the things, that he's eligible for parole, and getting together to make sure that doesn't happen, because he's going to continue to do it again. All right. Her website is Parents and Victims of Murdered Children. And the website is the same name, Bonnie, the mother of James, who was killed by her abuser. Parents and Victims of Murdered Children. Yes, I see it. And yes. Okay, awesome. All right. Anybody have any last questions? Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for your honesty and transparency and sharing your story. We have no doubt that someone is going to watch this and it's going to save their life. We have no doubt that someone is going to recognize that they are dealing with a stalker, right? Stalking is so dangerous. And we want you to know, stalking is not necessarily what you see on the news, not on the TV. That's not on the news, the TV. That's not it.
Well, and
right?
I think also I want to put this out there.
Please.
I think so many times as a parent, you can see signs that your children are going through. And, teens are hard-headed and, they have to do their own thing. But as a parent, it's so important that we try to make them understand that it's real. It's very real.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, especially with this month being Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. I think it's like so many parents do not speak to their children about dating violence because they think it would never happen. And who would have thought at 13 years old? And you know what I think is so interesting about that story? You were 13. Was it your dad who said, come back in a year? Your stepdad said, and he came back in a year.
And I think he thought by saying that,
he'd go away.
Come back.
Yeah. But he had these tendencies from a long time ago. And parents, please hear us when I say, we're telling you, this is not the first doggy door story. You think your child is safe and sleeping.
And I will say this too. At one point he had come in through the doggy door and my stepdad was out of town. My mom was upstairs And he was in the house, and I remember freaking out. I'm like, you have to go. My mom is up. You've got to go. And he took a key, because at that time the locks had the keys that you could remove. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
So there's an actual lock, like on the inside, like where you would turn the key.
On the doggy door?
No, on the door.
Oh, okay.
He was already in the house. And he unlocked the door, removed the key, and took the key with him that night.
Oh.
So yeah, he was very much. If he wanted
took
in
the
house,
key to your door.
he took the key to the door.
My goodness, very bold.
Very bold.
Wow. Thank you for your candidness, such an inspiration. Thank you for being so strong and sharing your story. Thank you, Norma, for putting the website. It was crazy because I met my abuser when I was 13 years old too. Someone said that is scary. And I think people just think that we're just chatting right now, y'all. So if y'all got to pop up, we'll see y'all. But if you have questions, please. And I can't see Instagram if they have any questions. Can you let me know if they have any? Okay. But I want to say that I want you, the doggy door thing is really like, because this isn't the first time, and it's think that you think your child is safe. I've heard story after story about abusers climbing in windows. Now we're talking about doggy doors. So you think your child is safe in the next room, and that's not always the case. Have these conversations with them. Let me ask you, if your parents would have asked you as a teenager,
I wouldn't have told them.
You wouldn't have told them.
There was no way. I was so scared at that point of my stepdad.
So what?
There was no way I would have ever said anything.
Okay, so you were scared of what your stepdad would do. Mm-hmm. So what are we telling? What do we tell parents? Like, if they ask, we're saying they're not going to tell. So what do you say? What do you?
I think you know that that's an access point to your house.
Yeah, yeah.
Whether they tell you or not, you know that's an access point to your house. Take care of it.
Take care of it. And having a really good relationship with your children is really important too.
It is important, but I think there's a certain line that kids sometimes don't share information for whatever that reason.
Yeah, it's true. I would say definitely, even as an advocate, have them connected with a teacher, a counselor, somebody who they may, aunts and uncles, someone who they may share with, so that they always have that open door communication, that you know that if your child is in danger. I'm a teacher, and we're starting to teach the students in early middle school about, yes, Kay, I love that. Teaching them about teen dating violence. All right. Thank you guys for hanging with us. Thank you for joining us. Please, can you just give me your Facebook page one more time?
Angeline Thompson, domestic violence survivor.
And we're going to add it as well. And we are pushing to advocate to make sure that he stays behind bars. And that her story is told, that Bonnie, that James' name, we continue to say his name. Absolutely. His life matters. And Bonnie, we are just sending you so much love. All right, you guys, we'll see you later.
Thank you so much.
Ya. Can you hit that one first? What's your husband's name?
It's probably zoom it in.
Thank you. Is it not letting you? Okay, there you go. We're still on.